Top 10 favourite original Doctor Who novels. Hello and welcome to this week's video. Somewhat belated, apparently my microphone's decided to start working again despite not working all bloody week. Don't ask me, I only freaking work here. Anyway, so I will try and keep this thing going. It looks like it's working. The microphone thing is moving for the first time, so I'm hoping I'm not just talking into the ether. Let's begin. My top 10 favourite original novels. Obviously, I've done reviews of all the, well, up until the new series ones anyway. I've got the 8th Doctor books, the New Adventures, blah 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 blah. So I'm going to give you since I'm in a bit of a rush and want to get something out this week, I'm going to do a nice simple top 10 for you. Number 10, Time Worm Exodus. Only the second original Doctor Who novel. Well, not really, I guess. Do you count some? How many other companion books were there? There was that Turlo book, wasn't there? Well, it's only the second of the New Adventures line anyway. This basically is alternate history with when the Nazis won World War II because of alien influence. It's a very good read. It's good old Terrance Dicks. The man knows Doctor Who. The man knows how to write a story, and it's a great read. Still stands up over 30 years later. 9. The Banquo Legacy. One of the few 8th Doctor books I really like. I was not a fan of that range, as you can tell if you watch that review. This has a couple of issues, namely some of the stuff that's being held over from some of the other books and the impenetrable, interminable arc. But in general, this is actually a really cool little gothic horror story. There are scientific experiments going on that shouldn't be in a Victorian manner. The dead come back to life, and it all gets very unpleasant very quickly. This is a great book from Andy Lane, I think. Is it Andy Lane and Justin Richards? I can't quite remember. Great gothic thing. It's written in the form of diary things from a couple of different characters. It's a really effective little horror thriller, and I very much enjoyed it. 8. Time Worm Revelation, another early New Adventure. This was the debut of Paul Cornell. Not a very popular figure in Doctor Who fandom these days as a result of some unfortunate things on Twitter in the last few years. But his New Adventures were good, it has to be said. And this was a great debut. Very surreal, very strange, really beautifully written. It's the climax to the initial Time Worm arc that spanned the first 4 books of the New Adventures. It's really, really good, and I very much fell in love with it at the time. Cornell, from this point, became one of the writers to look out for in the New Adventures line. 7. Festival of Death. Everybody knows that the 4th Doctor, Romana 2 and K9 lineup is basically my favourite in the entire history of the show. There weren't enough original books with that team. There were a few, and most of them were very good, but there weren't enough. Certainly after Gareth Roberts kind of hung up his hat doing them, they were very, 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 very thin on the ground. In fact, one suspects almost any other writer was kind of too intimidated by that legacy to try and do their own. Except for Jonathan Morris, thankfully. Festival of Death is basically, I think it's more kind of season 18ish than season 17. Or more of more kind of a mixture of the two, in that there's a lot of comedy, but there's also a really dark tone to it, and some very existential horror. This is a really good, really fun, really strong sci-fi adventure with lots of humor. The characters are brilliantly realized. If you love this era like I do, it's definitely well worth a look. 6. Goth Opera, the very first of the missing adventures, so the first original novel to feature a pre-Sylvester Doctor, this time being the 5th Doctor, along with Nyssa and Tegan, and the debut novel was Paul Cornell again, and it's a vampire story. It's much more traditional than his New Adventures, but it's a very, very good story. Lots of gruesome horror. I think they had to alter the cover for booksellers because they were going to refuse to stock it, but because there was too much blood on Nissa, so they had to take all the blood off and just put one little spot on her chin because she gets turned into a vampire during the story. This is a very effective, very enjoyable, very fun start to the Missing Adventures. 5. Fear of the Dark. Trevor Baxendale was a very solid writer for mainly the BBC books. I don't really think he did any in the Virgins that I can remember. He did a lot for the BBC books. He started off kind of a little bit workmanlike, but as he got on, he got kind of clued into the horror genre, and his books got really good. And this is one of the strongest. It's another Fifth Doctor Nissa and Tegan one. There's an evil entity that's causing all kinds of chaos, and it's got a really dark tone and a really scary atmosphere. It's very based under siege. It's a very effective little horror story. If you like your Doctor Who dark and scary, this is definitely the way to go. 4. The English Way of Death. This was another Fourth Doctor, Romana 2 and K9 story, the second from Gareth Roberts. This one is very much in the mould of the City of Death, Shardar. You can imagine it filmed with lots of beautiful location filming in the English countryside during summer or spring. And it very much fits into that mould. It's a very strong, very entertaining story. Again, captures this era, those characters, and that sense of humour extremely well. What are we on now? 4? 3? 3, I think. 3. Deep Blue. This is a Mark Morris horror novel. He's still around working in Doctor Who fiction, I believe. This is it's a Fifth Doctor Tegan and Turlough story. But it's set in the 70s, so we get 70s units with the brig and that, which is a cool crossover. But it doesn't just rely on that, some might say fan wank. It's an effective seaside horror story where set in an English seaside town, and some very unpleasant things are starting to come out of the sea and do some very unpleasant things to people. This is a great little monster invasion horror story. Beautifully written. The regulars, and including the 70s unit, are beautifully captured. It's a lot of fun. Again, if you like especially when it comes to the books, my preferences were either the funny ones or the scary ones. This is a scary one. 2. The Romance of Crime. This was Gareth Roberts' first Missing Adventure and his first featuring, again, my favourite team, Fourth Doctor, Romana 2 and K9. This is more along the lines of the studio-bound stories of that era, like Nightmare of Eden or Horns of Nimon, in that it's mostly set on a space station. There is a little bit on an alien planet. Again, that's Creature from the Pit-ish, I would imagine, rather than the luxury location shooting. But it does it so beautifully. I absolutely fell in love with this book when I first read it. And this was, I think I said this during my Missing Adventures review. This was the period of Doctor Who fandom when because the first few years I was just loving everything and experiencing all eras and rah, 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 rah. And this was like, 94-ish? This was around the time when I was starting to kind of say which were my favourite eras. And this kind of helped crystallise my great affection for the Williams era and season 17 in particular. Number 1, probably not a surprise, my favourite piece of original Doctor Who fiction is Nightshade by Mark Gatiss, the new adventure. Again, as with so many on this list, it's a scary one. As with the Gareth Roberts ones, it's also been done as a big finish, I believe. It's a small English country town. An alien menace is present, and it's basically luring people to their deaths by taking the form of memories and nostalgia and fantasies and that sort of thing. I still say it's the best thing Mark Gatiss has ever written, and it's bloody good Doctor Who. Anyway, that's this week's video. I thought I'd get this one out this today. I don't like going. I mean, most YouTubers are dropping crap every couple of days. I can only manage it like once a week, so I really don't like missing a week, especially when it's out of my control because of a bloody awkward microphone. So I hope you enjoyed it. Bye for now.